Hello, and welcome to Through a Therapist's Eyes. I have a little bit of a different intro that I want to do today, and I want to warn you or kind of prepare you for a visualization, a quick little example of a visualization skill. And in this visualization is going to combine Coach Craig's teachings with breathing and our prior guest who is back here, Mr. Tom Dutta, with his teachings that he kind of gave us last week, which was fantastic. So I want to imagine pulling over like 50,000 cars all at once on the highway, pulling over, right? So that you can really get into this idea of a visualization skill. It's part of what we do in the therapy world. It's part of what we do in the coaching world as well. And I think it's pretty neat. So in our show last week, Mr. Tom Dutta gave us a nice metaphor. And I want to start out with Craig's teaching of breathing, really breathing correctly. And he did this in a training that I saw where you put your right hand on your chest and your left hand on your belly, and you breathe in deeply, letting your left hand with your belly move out. And then secondly, your right hand with your chest move out. And then he teaches proper breathing. So it's breathing in
through the nose,
and then breathing out. That long and that slow, 2 or 3 times, breathing somewhat normally, while I describe for you Tom's vision of walking down a path demonstrating the power of the brain's neuroplasticity. So you begin walking down the path in the nature, noticing the trees around you, noticing the birds around you, the sounds, the sights, the colors, how beautiful and relaxing it can be. And as you walk down the path that you've been down many times before, you find a ditch. And this ditch is hidden in such a way where you constantly find your foot landing in that ditch. But one day, as you're walking down, incorporating the vision of all the things that you see, and you're breathing intact, you notice the ditch before your foot gets to the ditch. And you walk around the ditch and you find a different path, a path that leads down a little ways to a new vision of the lake that is nearby. And this is a beautiful lake with the sounds of water and the sounds of the breeze with the sand at your feet. And this is a wonderful area to be. So the next time that you walk down the path, you notice the ditch again catching your foot. And what Mr. Dutta taught us last week is that with your brain's neuroplasticity, he says, learn how your brain works, quote unquote, that you will fall into that ditch unless you're purposeful about going to the new path and the beauty of the lake. So please come back, open up your eyes, breathe normally. You can now begin driving again if you've pulled off. And we welcome you to Through a Therapist's Eyes, where I am a mental health and substance abuse therapist. Craig is an unbeatable mind coach. I have a book, Re-Understanding Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self. He has a website, wininyourmind.com. He can work with you all through the nation. Contact him there. He'd love to work with you in his coaching of an unbeatable mind. We see the world through the lens and a coach here on Through a Therapist's Eyes. Being aware this is not delivery of therapy services in any way, and check out the website throughatherapist'seyes.com. Let's figure this thing out together is what I like to say, Craig. The human emotional experience. We have a lot to get to, man. How you doing? What are you thinking?
I'm doing great. You did a nice job there with the visualization.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You like that?
Yeah, sounded good.
Yeah, it's cool, man. I mean, I did that because I really wanted to demonstrate, one of the skills we talk about in mental health, visualization. I wanted to also demonstrate another skill that we talk about, that you talk about more, breathing. And thirdly, Mr. Dutta's teachings last week. I thought it was really, really cool. And I have another quote about that is really cool. But, well, I'll do that now. The quote Mr. Dutta had with us is, learn how your brain works. And I put a quote around that, and it's actually a comma. He says, when leaders fail to take care of their mental health, they undermine the mental health of those they are leading. Man, it's really a takeaway, Tom. I don't know if you realize that in the middle of the show, but welcome to Through a Therapist's Eyes again. Second week in a row, man. Super glad to have you back.
Hey, Chris, it's a pleasure to be back. I was just checking my feet. They're all dry here, so the visualization worked fantastic at this end. So thank you for that skill.
That is awesome. Yeah, it is. It is something that we definitely use a lot, and I don't use it in therapy quite so much because I do a lot of digging and whatnot with barriers such as trauma and that type of thing. I probably, Craig, you've made me think more than once, like I should do a whole lot more of that, in work. I think that we need to do a show on the combinations of coaching and therapy, what the similarities are, what the differences are, but pretty neat stuff. Tom, I wanted to do justice your introduction. Audience, hopefully we got the audio together. I apologize again. Last week, my voice got screwed up. Boy, could you imagine me doing a visualization, Craig, last week? Would that have worked out?
It wouldn't have been as good.
It would have been terrible.
Yeah, it would have been bad.
It would have been terrible. Tom, you're an amazing guy, and if you can stand to be humble about it for a moment and all this guy has done, I want the listening audience. And if you listen to the last show, I apologize. You have to hear this again, and I think it's important that we understand, who we're talking to. First of all, this guy has The Way of the Quiet Warrior is his book. That, dude, if you're in leadership in any kind, you need to check out. It is a excellently written text. It combines his storytelling, which is amazing, and his experience is even more amazing, if I might say. Is an international #1 best-selling author, 30 years of experience helping to build and grow companies in Canada. His leadership experiences in the financial services, IT, telco, not-for-profit, and health sectors. He includes many senior roles. You think of the ivory tower and the CEOs, right? In many of Canada's prestigious companies, including president and CEO and chairman of the board. He's host of the Quiet Warrior Internet Radio Show. Previously, general manager with Ocean Queen Financial, chief operating officer of the Annex Group, one of British Columbia's fastest growing IT professional firms, CEO of CRI Canada, division of Aegon, supplier of software and financial services globally. TELUS, one of Canada's largest telecommunications company. I mean, they called you, I think, by listening to you, Mr. Dutta, that you were what did they call you when they brought you in for all these mergers and everything?
Well, there's a term, I guess we'd call it, hired gun. In the corporate sector, when you're hired to deal with tough stuff, mergers, perhaps changing deep cultures, hired gun is somebody comes in and really just turns things around. And I always like to say takes the arrows and the bullets. You're kind of used as a shield by boards and the people who hire you. Quick example: in one assignment, I had to terminate 400 or deliver a plan to terminate over 400 people. And so it takes a pretty tough mindset. A lot of the skill you talked about, visualization. You have to. I'm a personality that struggles with that. I value people and deep relationships. Imagine me going into a company and being told the stock price fell $40 and we need to drive out $500 million in costs in the next 90 days. Go find me a way to, fire some people, maybe replace them with technology. And
Yeah.
that's a true assignment that I had. So gone through my career really just building and growing companies, but the truth is hired guns are out there. And I mean, it's a tough role, but they're necessary.
Sounds like wicked full of pressure.
A lot of pressure. And we talked about that last week, Chris, about the analogy of the pickup truck. The red truck. So if you're somebody in that role, and your truck has a payload capacity of 1 ton, well, in those type of jobs, very quickly the capacity can be 2, 3, 4 tons. And it's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when the darkness will come. Mental health, everybody has it, but in those particular roles, you see a lot of strife, and I call it the leadership graveyard. But in my research and the work I did, just working with people over, that career I had, you saw a lot of people suffer, struggling in silence.
Well, I wanted to end the show by complimenting you with that kind of stuff. I'm going to begin it and end it. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly picking up new ways and new things to kind of deal with people and stuff. And, that was one of them. Tom, I've used that metaphor in my therapy literally this week, probably about 3 or 4 times. It's just because it's a perfect metaphor of like why we need to really deal with our own mental health. And I think that's one of the things I just love about your work and your essence is that's like you drive that home in so many ways. It's just awesome, really.
Well, thanks. And so, sadly, we're all the same. We're connected by those threads in our stories. We all have a brain, and we all should get a checkup from the neck up, I say. But there's reasons why we don't do it. And I'd never minimize anybody who struggles with dealing with their mental health. And I guess going back to what you said about visualization, Chris, I always like to think that when I say something, it comes out of my mouth. I look at this flashing sign on the forehead of the person I'm speaking to, and it might say, "What do you mean?" So when we say dealing with your mental health, what are we talking about? So there's many things you have to do to stay mentally healthy, and I think that's the other part of it. That kudos to you, but shows like this and the passion, the work you guys are doing, we have to teach. I mean, right back to square one. They don't teach you in grade school, but we have to teach people. What does it mean to deal with your mental health?
So we have a lot to get to, audience. We're going to really be talking about, interestingly enough, CEO anxiety and depression and emotional mental health pressure. That's the overriding theme here today. But really, you just made the point again that I think was one of our main points from the show last time. Craig, we're all in mental health management, and whether we admire or respect these wicked successful people or not, listen, they are dealing with the same kind of feelings, the same kind of emotions, the same kind of challenges that we all really deal with. So you could say we're dealing with CEO and leadership management, but Tom, one of the things they see, and you just made the point again, we're all doing that. We're all doing that. So I wanted to go to culture, and you just gave me a perfect segue to that, but we got away with it. So I want to go there. But then first, Craig, I wanted to check up on, your pen was going crazy last show. You had a lot of thoughts buzzing around. I know one of them was related to Jordan. So I think I want to toss it over to you. Have you been thinking about that show last week through your brain? Let's go back with your thoughts about Jordan and anything else that you were kind of really thinking in summary of last week.
I love it when you put me on the spot.
I usually do, man. Hey, it's raw, real, and genuine in the person.
No, I think that was an interesting conversation, and I'm glad Tom has joined us again to go into some more details on some of the things we were talking about. Tom, we talked about Michael Jordan last time, and we talked about how he came up and how he had to fight to become the best basketball player to ever lace up his shoes and step on the court, in my opinion, anyway. And you said something to the effect of Jordan's purpose became helping people deal with failure. And I'd like to hear more about that, because to me, what drove him was he didn't want to lose. He had that competitive nature, and he, getting cut from the basketball, he did not want to lose, and he would do whatever it took to win. And, if someone said something in the media before a game about Jordan, he just wanted to destroy that person and humiliate them on the court.
Bad.
So, maybe we could talk a little bit more about Jordan's competitive nature and whether or not he indeed was helping people deal with failure, or whether or not he was just a cutthroat competitive that wanted to mow everybody down in his path.
And if there's any generalization, what motivates people on a high level.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I think before you can help people deal with failure, you need to be able to have failed yourself. And that's the thing about the story. I know you can go and look at the online movie now and read the books about Jordan, but the guy failed. I mean, he was cut from his basketball team. He cried in his room. If those things hadn't happened, I don't believe that he would be the champion he is. I also don't believe, and I want you to visualize this and get your audience, close your eyes for a minute and visualize you're standing on a court and you are Jordan, and you've got, 8 players there. They're all looking to you as a leader. But you also know from researching with your coach that 5 of them, when they're younger, come from broken homes. 1 come from the ghetto. 1 had issues with drug addiction. And they're just a lost bunch of warriors who learn to take a ball, bounce it up and down, and shoot it through a hoop. And they found that as their connection. They found that as somewhere they belong. The thing what you would know if you're Jordan is when you look at these guys, you look far beyond the skill of basketball. Now you're looking deep into the souls of a tribe of broken people. And you have to find a way to motivate them and get them to see the greatness within themselves. And that's the hardest part. So somebody like a Jordan who's been through failure, who's been through challenges, who probably sometimes I would say doesn't communicate as effectively. The guys on the other side, when they see Jordan, when they see him talking like that, or telling his story, his backstory, they say, you know what, dude, you're real. You're real. You're just like me. There's one thing in your story I can follow. Now, if he stood out there as a arrogant, superstar and just told them to command and control, do this, do that, you got to be like me, none of those guys are going to be able to relate. So this, if you take it into the leadership realm, which is what I talked about last time, I don't care if you're a CEO, a business owner, a mom and pop entrepreneur. If you have one or more people working with you, you've got to find a way to have them see you as somebody who's just like them. And that's rapport that connects to the heart. And that's really the beginning of leadership. One more thing about culture. There's a lot of talk about culture, and culture is really owned in companies by the leader of the company. And then it's got to be driven down through the layers of leadership. But even before culture, there's two things you have to deal with: managing yourself and managing your physical and mental health. And if you don't show up in your best game with those things, you can never create the culture. So going back to Jordan, I'm ping ponging here in my mind. Now Jordan's standing on the court looking at a tribe of broken players or players with dysfunctional backgrounds, but they got a skill, basketball. But if they can't talk to each other, if they can't feel inspired, if they can't feel that they're loved and good enough inside, they're not going to go out and win for him. Number two, if they come to the court and they've got mental health challenges, in other words, the noise of the crowd creates anxiety, or the depression and the medication or something they're dealing with. If they've got those issues and they're not managing their mental health, their performance will be substandard. And the last one is the physical self. You know that athletes have to be peak. I mean, you look at Jordan. So what he does is he exemplified that. He came to the court peak condition mentally, physically, and I would say he managed himself. What he did in the locker room doesn't matter. I mean, we all look, let's be really true. They say that you'll be far remembered for what you do in private than what you do in public. So we all saw the game face of Jordan, but in the locker room, he was a tough dude, and probably was a little bit not so professional in the way he dealt with his guys. But you know what? That's what made him real, and that's what made the guys love him. You're just like us.
That is a huge takeaway to me. Neil Marca, make a note of that, because the difference is, I heard you say, if you're working with one or more people, there's a big if there. If you're not, you can just rampage and rage, being a tennis player or being a guitar player or, being a single solo artist. But we're talking about a group and a culture. So if you're working with one or more people, and maybe that's what made Jordan successful in leading, is in a different way than his terribly challenged rage to never lose, he did other things that maybe we don't see. Is that possible, Craig?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not talked about. That's not dealt with. No one deals with the mental health. No one really talks about on ESPN the relationships of, point guard and the 3 spot and the 5 spot on the court. They don't talk about that.
Right.
But if you're going to have a show talking about the team and how the team works and how coaching creates a culture, coaching from the court to create a culture, boy, I wonder what's in Jordan's head. But it's not talked about. Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I think so.
Duh, Tom, that is fat. Now I got to interview Jordan, man. Let's get him here, man. I got to know. Let's transition to culture, because that was one of the big things too. Well, Craig, is there other things that you had burning that was on your mind from last week?
Maybe something we kind of touched on was the fact that, you have these hard charging individuals like Michael Jordan, and we mentioned Churchill's tough upbringing. And there are leaders out there who just seem to be so driven and so, like, take Steve Jobs. I heard he was a tyrant to work for. On the other hand, you have guys like, and maybe Richard Branson comes to mind. He seems to be a more level-headed guy as far as where he is from an overall emotional state, and
his
leadership.
Branson's jumping out of airplanes.
True.
Nice.
But he seems to be more emotionally. You hear these stories about Jobs losing his mind and cursing out everybody in the boardroom. But Branson seems to be more in tune with his mental health and his emotional state. So as far as leadership styles go, is one of those better than the other? I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Tom?
Yeah, and I've wrote about this in my book, and I first of all I want to read a passage here. It's a short paragraph. Culture is like the weather. It's the environment in which one works and plays. Every leader has the opportunity and responsibility to build the best culture possible for their people to thrive in. Before a leader can lead their team or their organization, they must learn to lead themselves. And you talk about leadership styles, but I'm going to kind of push it back even further than that before we get to that.
Tom, is that from your book, actually?
No, it's from someone else's book. And they say that when you first learn it, it's theirs. When you read it or teach it to somebody else, it's still theirs, and then the third time it's yours. This is actually from a friend of mine who actually was instrumental in building Disney World. So yes, culture. And I just taught a group of 20 executives a full day on culture. And here's the thing about that: when you ask
We're
the
go-
question,
We're
when you
gonna
ask the-
sit on culture for a second because I have a
yeah,
challenge too with you. But Craig, I gotta say, how awesome is that when you have the humility of a guy who is of the gravity that Mr. Dunna is, and he's got this international best-selling author. And he's quoting another book. Like, I just want to honor you with that, Tom. Like, that's amazing.
Oh, thanks, man. Culture's weaved into my book. I've seen that you went there. I want to just say that I've got 6 stories in my book written as we fictionalize them to fables, so you couldn't tell who they're about. But we go into, in one case, a toxic company where the leader, the president, the owner, is a bad dude, and the culture is toxic. What does that mean? People are quitting on the first day I work there. He comes in and he's insulting people. People are afraid of this leader. Now, that's a toxic culture. So how do you turn that around? Like, how do you turn around? We can talk about that too. But going back to what I was saying, when you build a company, the first thing you do is you do some strategic planning, which simply means you get in a room and brainstorm, and you kind of shape out what's your vision. Look at Elon Musk and, for example, Tesla. What was his vision? You look that up. Some would say build cars, others would say improve the environment. But if you're trying to do something like he's doing there, which takes a culture where people have to make mistakes, and then when they do, they learn and they can't be penalized, where people have to be given the tools to be able to imagine and create out of their imagination this thing that nobody has seen yet. What Steve Jobs did is he changed the way people use computers, but what was in his head, he had to create a vision and then bring the people in that fit that vision, and then create the culture that fits that vision. What do I mean by that? There's companies I've worked for. I'll give you an example. I work for a mental health company that every year, you know what their vision was? If we can keep the lights on and not run out of money. No, serious. If we
Yeah.
keep the lights on, not run out of money, we're doing a good job. I was on the chairman of the board of that company for 10 years. And I was given a difficult task of moving the CEO out. And why? Because that was the vision. So when a vision is we just want to keep the lights on, what do you think the culture might be in that company? Well, I'll tell you, the culture was laziness. We'll just show up and do the bare minimum. And
Right.
there was no creative thinking. There was no, hey, I have an idea. How about we put this out there and we try to create something to grow more revenue or add more people to use our mental health services? None of that. As chair of the board, I was asked by the board to change the leader. We did, and we reshaped the vision. This is what our vision was: to make the world a better place through mental health wellness. And we brought in a leader who had experience knowing how to create something that wasn't there before, but then started hiring people who had positive attitudes, the ability where if they failed, they could get back up again. And so that's what I mean by culture. But if the leader of the company, which is always the case, sets the culture, just like Jordan would set the culture on the court for his team, if the leader of the business is not managing themselves, managing their mental health first, they're not going to be able to show up every day and create that consistent culture. Listen, we talked about being in health. I'm just going to riff on this for a minute. There are fat guys leading companies. There are guys who drink scotch for breakfast. There are guys who are beating their wives at home. I mean, there are women coming in who have got 5 children at home, and their boards won't let them go home and take a Zoom meeting from home because it's just not the way it was done here. These people, look, they have to set the tone and the culture of the company. If they're not healthy and they're not managing themselves, what do you think is going to happen when they're showing up? Now, I'll go last thing, and I'll push it back to you, because you asked me a question on the styles of Branson and Jobs. We lost him way too early, by the way. Steve Jobs, guy was brilliant.
Totally agree.
Yeah, but there's different leadership styles are needed during different times. So somebody once told me there's a wartime leader and a peacetime leader. In wartime, COVID-19 hit. We're losing money. We've got to lay people off. All these things are happening. People are free from their jobs. They're losing grandparents. People are dying in their families. As a wartime CEO, you basically become directive. So the style of leadership is you tell people what to do because you've seen the fear before, and you get them through it. The problem with Jobs is he didn't know how to talk to people because he had his own, what I call, thinking trap, where he was abandoned when he was younger and he was angry, and he carried that with him. He never learned why he did what he did. Then you go to Branson, and Branson's what I call a yellow personality. I have in my book, I talk about motivational personality science. It's deeper than behavioral science. A yellow personality, to simplify it, sees the world through the motive of fun, and they simply live in the moment. So Branson, the reason why a lot of people are happy with a Branson style of leadership is because he shows up to work, he's fun, he's happy, he lives in the moment. He can't see the danger. He can't see ahead 2 weeks. I mean, if you ask him, what are you going to do tomorrow? He's like, huh? Well, let's talk about today. So a leader like him will need to surround himself with people that are better than him, people that can vision and see the future. But his leadership style will work if he wants to build a company that's innovative, where people have fun, where they're positive. And look what he's done. Then you got Jobs over there, and he created a fear-based culture by his style leadership, but it didn't work because when you have fear and you walk in a room and say, I want you to stop everything you're doing, and by the end of the day, create something new. When you have fear that if you don't create something new, you might have your blank ripped, the brain goes to the negative. It can't go into the imagination of the positive thinking. So if you had a leader replace Jobs who had the style of a Branson, the communication style, right? Being able to communicate optimism, enthusiasm, combined with Job's style of being directive. I want you to stop and go create something new. Let's kick back butt. Let's have fun. Let's all go out for beers after. You guys are amazing. That was simply the leadership style that they eventually, needed to go to at Apple. So I don't know if you're following me on this, but you start with a vision. You don't start with what's the style of leadership. You have to go back. What are you trying to create? Keep the lights on, or start the future.
I hear what you're saying, and maybe Apple's transition now, because I don't get the feeling that Tim Cook's the same as Steve Jobs in that respect. He seems to be more of the Richard Branson-ish type manager or leader, I should say, not manager, but leader of Apple, as opposed to what Steve was.
This is why I love, as you like to say, Tom, riffing with Mr. Dutta, because I'm sitting there listening to you. My brain's buzzing with all these kind of things. Let me try to get this out in the sense that when you talk about leadership style, that equates very well to what we do in mental health, Tom. I don't know if you realize it, but for instance, when somebody is in crisis, right? That is not the time in the mental health field to be exploring issues, to be looking at barriers to where you want to go and where you want to be as an individual. And same thing equates to a company, because let's face it, a company is, a bunch of people together. What we do when somebody is in a crisis state is we say, okay, stop. This is what we're doing. This is what needs to happen, and we jump in and become very active. If you're going to the emergency room or you're taking the knife away from the kid or whatever it is that you're doing, it's not the time to just process. When things are calm, you can back down and you have a different style, if you will, of leadership, quote unquote, in mental health, a different style of interacting where you might be silent for 47 seconds. Like, that's a long time to be silent. You just sit back and you just wait and you let percolate in what's going on in that person's mind. So there's different styles for different times, is what I heard you say, Tom, for wartime and peacetime, so to speak, or crisis time or explore time.
Yeah,
Does that make
absolutely.
sense?
It does. You nailed it. And then you're thinking about now that the next generation coming up, which are the millennials. This is my daughter, 22, 23-year-old, who's in engineering school and universities. They're going to run the world. So the leadership style, by the way, for leading the generations that are coming up to replace the boomers has to be coaching and mentoring, not telling people what to do, not being a boss. And so there you go up to back to what Craig said. There's going to be a whole shift in the way we have to lead people. And a lot of the folks who grew up like my dad did in the army, who taught me command and control, at a certain point, you're not going to be able to lead the next generation forward. So this whole leadership culture thing is a big topic. I want to tie it to visualization as well for a moment. If I said to you that, hey, welcome to the Tommy factory. This is your first day. Our culture here is family. Our culture here is having fun. Let's go at it. What are you thinking? I bet you if I ask each of you what visualization, what picture have you created in your mind about what the culture looks like? I bet you it's not clear. Am I right?
No, it would be me, Craig, and me getting the kayak that he's going to buy, talking about through a therapist's eyes, kayaking down this creek, South Fork River, having fun and talking ideas, man. That's what came to my mind when you said that, man.
All right. So you're right on. So let me just take a different look at it. If I said, "Welcome to," and I'm going back again to the book that I paraphrased, and the reason why I love it is because I just recently read it, and everybody knows Disneyland. And I went to Disneyland when I was younger. Man, I remember that ride, the Indiana Jones ride. Holy crap. We waited 2 hours in line for that thing for like a 3-minute ride. It's incredible, especially when the big ball came rolling and you thought you're going to get run over.
Nice.
But the happiest place on earth. Think
Yeah.
about this. So the couple people I've been talking to recently who are no longer there, but they created pretty much over a decade or so the culture there. 44,000 cast members come to work, and you and Craig are in charge. One of you is the CEO, one of you is the vice president. And how do you get everybody to understand what the happiest place on earth looks like from a cast member point of view? And if you look deep, and what I love about the work you're doing again is the mental health. Through our eyes, we see people who might be dealing with, mental health issues, because that's the truth. Look to your left, look to your right, and everybody's got something going on. So maybe at home you had a tough day and you can't come to the happiest place on earth, and now you got to put on your game face. Maybe your dad's sick and he's got cancer. Maybe your dog's died. Maybe you've got a child and you got to get home on time, and they've got a cold. You come to the happiest place on earth. So how do you get like you guys know, when you've been there, it is the happiest place on earth. I'm blown away at how every one of those cast members gives you this feeling of happiness. Well, here's what they do. They do a million little things, but one example is, if you're a cast member, they tell you, they give you a list of things so you can visualize and learn what creating that happiest place on earth looks like. One of them is no cell phones in the park. No cell phones in the park, or cell phones are turned off and left in the locker room. I work right now, and I think I might have mentioned to you on the last show, I'm doing a side hustle waiting tables at a restaurant. I've had a brain injury from a fall off a bicycle, and my doc says, get off your butt, go do something physical. I got to tell you, the tips are pretty good. You got to go wait tables, man.
Yeah.
$1,000 a month tip. And the people I'm meeting, you talk
Yeah.
about humility. Nobody knows who I am, but for a few hours a day, I'm going to wait tables at a restaurant. Truth is, a buddy of mine who runs a company that bought a restaurant tap house, and was failing, and he said, we need good people who can talk to people. So there I am, Tommy the hired gun disguised as a server.
Yeah.
And I'm in there, but I look around, and half the servers are at the bar on their little cell phones texting. They're over in the kitchen cooking, and then they're checking off. One guy's got a little earbud in and he's listening to music while he's cooking. So maybe your pizza's going to be burned a little bit. The point is, here's what Disney does. Disney says, while you're here, this is what it looks like. Your cell phone is off. Your cell phone is put into the locker room. Everybody understand, right? Anybody have a concern? Perfect. So that's just one small point. So you draw a visual picture of what the culture looks like, but it's got to be bite-sized where you can see it. So you say, somebody says we have a culture of innovation. My favorite, I'm working on a global mission right now with my work. My mission is to help every business create a courage culture, and we can talk about that another time. But if I said to you, I'm going to create a courage culture, if you're an employee, what does that mean, Tom? And here's the thing: I want everybody to know, when you have a leader and the leader's talking to the employees, most employees on the below will not ask questions. Some are afraid to look stupid. Some don't know what question to ask. They don't understand. So you have to first of all, as we said, manage self, which means a lot of things, manage mental health and physical health, and create the culture. But it starts with visualizing and getting everybody right down to the cast member on the front line. What do I do? Here's one quick one, then I'll give it back to you on this. I thought about this, my head went in a different direction. There was a company that had a hotel company, and they basically taught every employee a culture of accountability. So we can say, what does that mean? Well, accountability means that if something happens in the hotel, it's everybody's job to help sort it out. Even if you don't have the tools to do it, if your mindset is, it's my job to help fix that, you might go to somebody and say, hey, this is broken. We need to deal with it. The elevator one day in the hotel, if you walk up the big marble slabs, beautiful elevator, big lobby, had a big bouquet of flowers, incredible flowers, brilliant colors, and the petals were falling off and it was dried out. And for 2 days, everybody in the hotel as an employee walked by it. Nobody did anything about it. The owner of the hotel came for a tour and just got super angry. This was a woman who is the best at hotels, but unfortunately had Steve Jobs' personality, who just went on a tirade. So they decided to teach everybody this accountability. They write down to the janitor. They said, you, the janitor, if you see flowers, if you're cleaning the elevator and the flowers are falling, you don't just sweep up the petals. You go tell somebody we need new flowers. So guess what happened now? They went back after, and the janitor actually then took ownership of the flowers. And they eventually give the janitor a 1-800 number that they could call to order flowers. And they gave them a budget. So they set it up with a flower shop. They said, this person might call you, and if they do, you're to deliver us new flowers. At 10 o'clock at night, the janitor was cleaning. The flowers looked like crap. They phoned that number, left a voicemail. The next morning, when they were home sleeping, the flowers showed up. So how's that for creating a culture of accountability? So now you know if you said a culture of accountability, the janitor wouldn't get that, but the janitor would never ask, what do you mean by that? Because they don't know. So culture is a small word, but there's a lot. And you know what? It's not hard to create a culture. We have to learn how to do it.
I love it. I absolutely love it. First of all, man, my head's buzzing with multiple directions as well, Tom. So first of all, for our listening audience, we are not going to cover the story of Tom Dutta because we did that last week. And I really want to refer your listener to part 1. You will hear the amazing story of where this guy, leaped from the ivory tower in CEO position and whatnot, all the way down to, the falling and now he's, dude, you are standing back up. So the other thing is interesting to demonstrate the power of the effect on people with what you're using as Disney as an example. Dude, I literally had a client that went through, Craig, he went through heroin detox going to the happiest place on the world. Okay. That's the impact that you can have with a good culture and how you can impact people. He literally went through a week or two of heroin withdrawal at Disneyland with his kids and family there. Yeah. That's one of the things that came up in my head, Tom. How's that for impacting people?
It's huge. It's huge.
See, it's just beautiful. I mean, that's what I see through my eyes sometimes, guys, when we're talking about mental health and managing your mental health. And we're talking about groups of people today, like the applications in the world and in your, making an imprint on your immediate circle is just, I just get so excited about that. Craig, I'm making an executive decision. We're not going to take a midpoint break. I want to save the minute and keep rolling. That okay with you? Me. Yeah. All right. Let me push back on you a little bit, Tom, on this idea with culture. I was thinking about it from our show. Now, in social work, that's the the discipline that I come from in doing counseling and therapy, psychodynamic therapy, whatever you want to call it. We have a lot of words in social work specifically. Okay, we have what's called systems theory. It's a bit of a tenet in the way that we see the world. And it's real simple. It's just that, you are an individual system as a person. I don't think we've ever talked about systems theory in a show, Craig, have we?
No,
Dude,
it's a new term to me. I haven't.
That's a good one. Make a note of that, Neil, and we need to come back to that. Systems theory is cool because you are a system in and of yourself. Okay. And then you're another system in and of your marriage. And then you are a third system in and of your family. And you see where we're going, right? Go ahead.
It's kind of like Ken Wilber's integral theory.
I don't know what that
There's
is.
an I sphere, a we sphere, and its sphere.
Yeah.
The I is obviously me. The we's me and you.
Yeah.
The it is the system of this podcast that we're in. So
we are a system and through a therapist's eyes. I'm not alone. I got some guys, right? We have systems of our school system, our community, our country, our national identity. And you have all of these, if you just bubbled them around, you have all of these different systems that you're a part of that intermingle. That's why human relationships in mental health are so dynamic, so dynamic. And so from that perspective, boy, did I just condense systems theory down to like, wow, how did I do that? You said, Tom, that, and I agree with you on this part, that the CEO has the biggest microphone, and it comes from the head down to create the vision that you're talking about and the culture that you're talking about. But the part that I want to push back is that you said that managers can't do it. And I'm not so sure that I agree with that from what I just described. I think it's awful hard to push your mentality and your culture upward, for sure. But I think even that can happen. Like, I can have an influence on my CEO if I shoot my mouth off with something that's really important that he hears or she hears that can kind of transform some of that. But certainly as a manager, Craig, you can think of in the bank, people that you manage, your unit, your system. I think, Tom, that Craig can absolutely create a culture within that system in the bigger system. That's what I want to push back, because I think that's empowering to sort of middle management and all the other people that are involved in a tough culture. Does that make sense, Craig?
Yeah, makes sense to me.
And so maybe we can even use Craig as an example with his team, his system. Tom, how can that work in a realistic way?
Yeah, absolutely. And what by the way, what you just described there is a culture of, I'll call it what this conversation I would call is a culture of safety. So we're having a conversation, we have a deep relationship with each other, and you can push back, say, Tom, I push back with you. There are companies where if you said that to people, there'd be fear, man. Or some companies where none of the employees can say, I want to push back on you, boss.
Yeah.
So kudos. I want to just break it down. I agree with everything you said. I think it's interpretation that culture, when you go and look at the let's take the corporate world, the person who owns culture in most companies, when I say own, they're compensated for it. It's on their scorecard. Their boss holds them accountable in companies that are set up right. And so, for example, if you want to build Apple, you bring in somebody who can lead at the top, somebody who has maybe some of the characteristics to create the culture you want. Every manager down the line, every supervisor, every employee can teach and build culture. So you're right, Craig can, as a manager. What I'm getting at is, if you don't, first of all, create your culture with inclusion, you can look at a lot of the ways companies do it. They do strategic planning, which means taking everybody away for a day in a room and talking about culture, talking about, vision, having everybody from each layer of the company involved in those discussions creates ownership of the culture, number one. But number two, what I'm getting at is there's many leaders who lead companies who meet with their boards or meet with their advisory boards, or perhaps they're just lone wolves running their own company. They have in their head this idea of culture, what it is, and they just assume that Craig's going to know what he has to do. That's what I'm getting at. The larger an organization, the more layers, you have to be able to define and visualize it. And I got to know if Craig's working for me as a manager. I got to know that he understands crystal clear what it looks like and his language, what he's doing. I trust he can do it. I mean, I'm just assuming that he's got the skills, he's got the mental health and mindset, but he's got to roll down the consistent culture. I'll give you an example. I'm working in a company now doing executive coaching, and there's 12 companies in this one global brand. Okay. And there's a Craig running each of the companies. All right. I'm the CEO, and my vision and my culture is to have an engaged workplace where there's no titles. Everybody knows everybody. When we work together in the trenches, everybody, is on. There's no CEO. There's no job title. It's an open culture of inclusion. Okay, so just follow me on this. That's in my head, and my boards in the planning session said we want you to create a company where everybody believes they're all working together and they can share ideas. It's not hierarchical, etc. Okay, you with me?
Gotcha.
All right. So you and Craig are running two of those 15 companies under this umbrella. So I one of the things that the CEO wants is for you guys to get out there in the job site once or twice a month, walk around and talk to people, get to know them, go sit by the water cooler. I go out to your job site, Chris, and I say, "So how's it going?" And hey, Chris is one of my leaders. Just want to tell you that I'm looking for feedback. How is he doing a good job for you? We haven't seen him for 6 months. What? And then I go out to Craig's job site and they say, "Man, Craig is out here every day. He's out here every day. He's lifting the tools. He's got the jackhammers." And I'm going,
Craig, I suck, man. That's terrible.
and I'm going like, no wonder why he's never in the office. But at least he's not playing golf. So you see what I'm saying? You got 12 companies. So what we're saying is, if you really do deep dive on it, building culture and vision is created with inclusion. You have to, even some companies bring in frontline employees to a session for a part of it, and they give their feedback because they're connected to the customer, about vision, about culture. But in order to get buy-in, you develop a culture not from top down. But once the culture is developed, you drive it from top down. And you'll see the larger companies sometimes they move to formalized language, talk points. So in all your meetings, we want you to start using a couple words, right? A couple words. For example, there's a company that I work for and I led it as a CEO. And I said, at least in each meeting, we're going to use the word care and respect, because we had a culture statement that including care and respect. So we would say to leaders, when you're doing your updates, when you're doing your meetings, when you're talking to people, start using that language, because words matter, and start, pushing out a consistent culture. So if I walk through the whole company, everybody in every job site would say, "Man, I'm glad you're out here. That's, people respect, the respect around here is amazing. It's a great company." One more thing I want to share with you. Simple thing. At the restaurant, well, the tap house, man, we have 40 beer on tap there. And
Awesome.
I was there yesterday. You guys would love it. And if you watch my TED talk, I mimicked or actually acted out on stage. My first bout was suicidal thoughts, and I did the stand-up lines from the Holy Grail, the Black Knight. If you watch that, it's a 2-minute clip where he gets his arms and legs lopped off. He's going,
Just a flesh wound. It's not a fish wound.
Yeah. Just a flesh wound. 'Tis but a scratch. There's actually a beer at the tap house called 'Tis but a Scratch. I almost fell over yesterday. We got a new keg in, and I said, "What?" It's 'tis but. I mean, so God's putting me into places, man. First of all, I'm this TED stage, and now I'm at a tap house, and 'tis but a scratch. This is all working. It's working.
Love it. Love it.
But at the restaurant, I had a customer come up to me, and he wanted to give feedback, and he said, "I just wanted to tell you that we go to a lot of restaurants, and I haven't seen the level of care that all your people are doing here in terms of keeping us safe. We see you moving around, wiping down door handles, spraying tables. If we this is true, guys. If we have people from tables get up, we go to them and say, 'Could you please sit down? We can't have you moving around.' Our regulations, to keep safe." And how did we get that culture? Exactly the same. When we had our team meetings, the general manager of the restaurant, I'm one of the frontline people, created the visualization. What does it look like to have a safe environment? From a customer point of view, Tom, you got to be moving your rag and have a spray bottle in your hand.
Right.
And John, you've got to be putting the green card on every table so it says sanitize. And you've got to be, when a customer gets up, going up to them politely, asking them to sit down, because the other customers, if they don't see you do that, they might say, hey, this place, they don't care. They're not safe. So again, that's that. I rambled in many places on that one, but I think you're under. I hope you get my point on this, guys, that everybody owns delivering the culture, but there's always going to be one person that gets hired to drive it, and that's usually the top leader.
Yeah, it's funny, and it works. Well, I'm glad it came back to me because I was just following you, and then I wanted to go back and say, Craig, I've never liked a piece of chicken with bread and a pickle. You know where that comes from?
I have no idea.
That's all they give you, Tom, is a piece of bread, a pickle, and a piece of chicken on meal number one at Chick-fil-A, right? But I love that because Chick-fil-A says, on the condition of you and being employed there, I appreciate you, right? That's a culture. That's a culture that really probably came from the top down, I'm sure. And you know what McDonald's next to Belmont, North Carolina, Belmont, McDonald's says when I go to their checkout window now?
No idea.
They say, I appreciate you. And the thing is that's a Chick-fil-A thing, and the McDonald's thing saw that works for them, and we want to incorporate parts of that culture here. Now, I'm not going to talk about which is the best restaurant, although McDonald's does give more than a pickle on their meal number one. Just saying.
I just want to jump in. I think that's brilliant. And that gets to my point that when you say you even have 5 leaders in your company and they all come from different places, then they're bringing different cultures to the table. I also like to use my family as an example. My wife's Italian, so there's a culture. My parents are Indian. I'm they're from the Fiji Islands. And so my daughter-in-law is Japanese. So when we sit at the dinner table, there's 3 different cultures. And man, sometimes it's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's how companies are. When you bring leaders from Chick-fil-A into, McDonald's, hey, they bring in their culture with them, and that's how they're teaching. So you got to embrace that and maybe use their ideas when you create your culture, because cultures shift, right?
Exactly. And, I use that in marriage counseling, Craig, constantly, right? Think about mental health, think about culture and marriage counseling. I love it at the holidays time, right? I married you, you married me. I'm the guy, you're the girl, and your family did it this way. My family did it that way. And I think that way is better. And so we're going to do it that way, right? How's that going to go off? No, you did it this way. I do it that way. This is what are we going to pull from yours and mine to create with our new culture, our family together, and our kids. And so it's funny how these things kind of push around. Okay, let me transition this a little bit to a little bit of the same thing as I go with you, Tom, where you're at about the fear factor. Before I do, I wanted to get to a segment of like in the boardroom, and I just don't think that we're going to be able to do that. So if you're listening to this show, I think that, Tom, would you be okay if I did a little plug for the listening audience for the monthly thing we talked about?
Go for it.
Okay, it's not much that I can say yet, but there are so many things, and I've written a couple more things down, Tom, that I want to ask you about and talk to you about. And so the listening audience understands we're going to get it together and organize it in some way. We're going to have maybe like a monthly spot where you and I hook up, because I think it's that cool, the things that we're talking about, mental health, leadership, individual responsibility, humility. There's a lot of things that I think we can get into with that. So we on this in some form or fashion, we're going to hear a lot more from you. Is that so?
Absolutely.
That's the intent. So the fear, let's get back to that and stay with this idea that you're talking about. And I'm actually coming at this from literally, Tom, I want you to know the impact that you can have, right? Like some of the things that I've saw with your TED Talks, which listening on is you got to check out TEDx. That's TEDx, and just click Tom, Tom Dutta, Dutta, and it'll come up. It is an awesome 15-minute heavy hitting short spot that you will get more of Mr. Dutta. I want to refer you to that. And Neil, you got that on our show notes, I'm sure. So I'm talking to a person in my office right now, and he's probably going to be hearing this and pretty sure about it. I'm not going to say much about him, of course, to protect his identity, but we were talking about the corporate world and the challenges that you have with really recognizing and giving credence to your mental health as a person. But the question is, Tom, Mr. CEO, Mr. Guy who's led companies, all this reality that we have with the high pressure environment, like it's big time. Let's be honest, is the question. How truthful can you be with your peers in the upper corporate world, really? And quote unquote, like get away with it. Like basically, for example, do the exploration, do the genuine exposure, be vulnerable with the reality that, hey, I'm stressed out and my kids are tripping me out or whatever might be going on for you. How genuine can you really realistically be and not get fired or fail to carry the respect that you need or, not be judged, right? How can you do this? And I put it in all caps in my show notes, before you get judged in the world of power.
Well, in many cases you can't, and that's why
Well, that's a bummer.
that's why. But there's hope. But to answer the question boldly, for decades I wouldn't talk about my stresses, my anxiety going into board meetings, my challenges with, fear of, an arrogant boss who maybe raised his voice and was
Right.
rather threatening. I wouldn't talk about it. But the world has changed. And, we have to, as I said in my TED talk, you know, we have to do something different and create a courage culture. But here's something magical. When I sit in round tables with my peers, so they call these peer groups, 5 to 10 other business leaders like me, in a cone of silence where they're guaranteed confidentiality, the blood comes out on the table.
Yeah.
The stories of stress, of anxiety about what's going on at home. But where can those people go in the workplace? Well, they can't go to their boards because their boards might think they're not capable. They can't go down to their people. They can't. I'm not saying they can't. That's the belief system. They can't.
Right.
But what if you were sitting around your boardroom table? If I was doing a board meeting as a CEO, it's a true story, and I said, "Can I just pause the meeting for a minute because I'm feeling quite stressed because right now the topic is heavy. You know, a few of you are not on the same page, and I want to just talk about that because we can get through it." And all of a sudden you see the shoulders drop, and all of a sudden a couple other people start saying, "You know what, I'm glad you said that, Tom, because it is stressful in here. This is a stressful topic. Letting people go is hard." It is.
Wow.
So when there's so much money spent on, let's just talk about mental health, it's deeper than that. It's what do you talk about? How do you talk about it? But creating a courage culture, simply, I'm not simplifying it, but I said in my TED talk, it's okay to say when you're not okay, right? So you can set, first of all, number one is the world's changing and business leaders coming up. You have to know this. So the business leaders coming up, many now are coming up with a different mindset. My father was a commanding officer in the military, but he was command and control. Many of our fathers taught us not to cry, to be tough, not to complain, not to say it's a weakness. But if you look around, you look at all the work done in leadership today by the thought leaders. Brene Brown's an example. Vulnerability is a skill. I was at the restaurant example yesterday. 6 young people are sitting around a table drinking beer, and they were talking about a mental health training course they took that day. And this one guy goes, all those things they said about burnout, about signs of burnout? He said, that's what I'm feeling. They're now talking about it. So there's hope because the world is changing. So here's what I would do. If I'm a company, I'm looking to hire my next leader, I would go find someone like Tom who knows how to start that conversation, I know how to go into my boardroom and create a culture of accountability, but a culture of talking about, how we're doing. It's okay. There's a tool that I use in my board meetings, just FYI. We do a 5-minute, what's called check-in round table. And we have a form, and you talk about the 3 things, 3 pluses and 3 minuses in business, family, and your personal life. It's a way to get deep and check in. So everybody just goes around the table. When one person's reading theirs out, everybody's listening deeply. And we're not getting into the stories, but once you break through, they say the first person go through the wall gets bloody. Once you get through that wall, you're going to see major, amazing things. You're going to see now 10 people in a board that'll grow together and say, you know what, I can say that my daughter was being bullied at school. I can put that in I can talk about that. Nobody's going to judge me. So you start that culture. I believe it's like a rock snowball rolling down a hill, that once we start creating that culture, and I called out the top leaders in the world because I believe that it starts at the top. This is one thing that starts at the top. It starts with the leader, the right leader. It starts with the board if they have one, and then it goes through the organization top down. Last thing I want to share with you on that is it really made me angry, but there was a spot on the news probably 6-8 months ago when I was doing my TED talk about a very, very famous coffee company, which I won't mention the name on your show. And the CEO was being interviewed, and the comment was, "Oh, we bought 5,000 people here, and we really care about, mental health, and we're starting to roll out to one lines where they can phone in and they can get help for the counseling." And I'm looking at this guy going, that you had one opportunity there, dude, to say that, sometimes when I lead this company, it's so stressful. Sometimes I go to my board of directors and I have to sit down and say to them, I don't know if I want to be here anymore because this is what's going on. Let's talk about it. I'm ready to lead us through it. If the mindset, collective mindset of the people, top of an organization, are all about mental health is not a problem. Mental health is an opportunity. And if you create a courage culture where you can start the courage to talk about mental health, let's go back and say this. How about preventative mental health? How about having a workplace where you have a Zen room and every employee, you get perks, there's comfy chairs, you have journals, everybody's got a journal, it's in your little cubby hole, like at school. When you come in, we're going to give you 15 minutes personal time to go do your journaling, to put on a headset, go do meditation. Man, and the CEO's the CEO's sitting in the corner of that room, and 5 or 7 people from the company come in and they go, "There's Tom. He's doing his meditation." Look,
Dude, you get it. You
we
so get it.
we can you put me in a company and tell me to turn it around. Here's what you need to do this. You need to have lived experience with mental health. One, you need to believe that vulnerability and saying you're not okay is not shame, but it's actually a strength. Those two things, I can go out and find out all the people I need to create a culture like that. I can do that.
I want to be there with you. I want to stay tapped into you, Tom, because I think, Craig, honestly, I'm going to make a bold statement. I think that when this guy decides to, I predict that he might be creating the next Google or something. Honestly, I just have sense, Tom. I don't know what that means, if it means anything or if it's in your head, but I can kind of see that. But I want to point out a contradiction here that both bums me out yet gives me hope. And I was listening to you and I got really frustrated at first, and then you calmed me down as you're going through, and I agree with everything you just said. But I wonder if you can explain the contradiction between what I heard you say. And again, what I heard you say is, but there's hope. I'm like, okay. Well, he explained the hope in it. But you said it needs to be okay to say when I'm not okay. But you started out with my question saying, but you can't. So
that's the stigma.
Yeah.
That's a stigma. So, however I'm going to say it, and I said this was part of my TED talk for decades. I couldn't say it, so I'm going to read you something now. Maybe this will help. I brought this with me, a little surprise, if you allow me. It's out of my book, but it's out of my second book, and here's a picture of it. The second book,
Quiet Warrior. Okay.
The Quiet Warrior teaches Jeannie easy skills to create happiness. And what I've done is I've put in there feature stories of business leaders who share their stories and their mental health skills, that how they got through those mental health challenges. My co-author, I just want to give a toot to this. Donna J. Setterland is actually a classic Disney style illustrator, and she's an Imagineer and she's an author. When I did my TED talk, she phoned me because she was doing something for me on another book that I was thinking about, just illustration. And she said, for the first time in my life, I want to tell you, Tom, that I'm going to tell you that your story is my story. And she said that all the things that you talked about on the stage at TED, she said they happened through parts of my life. But she said, for the first time, I felt I have somebody I can go talk to. So we ended up talking. We decided we're going to write this book. So I have people I know just like you do, and I want to read you something here. I don't know why this came in my head when you were asking about the contradiction, but here it is.
Okay.
It's a fellow named John McComb, and the story is called From Hell to Hope. Bear with me for a few minutes. I look back over a successful 50-year career in broadcasting, and this was an American who came to Canada and started his career in broadcasting, and realized there wasn't a time when I wasn't shadowed by mental illness. In fact, if I'm honest, I've suffered with anxiety my entire life. Even as a child, I can remember the dis-ease I felt about life and myself. Throw in the fact I grew up in a wildly dysfunctional family, complete with the four horsemen of psychological apocalypse: alcoholism, prescription drug abuse, domestic violence, and attempted suicide. I was primed for a long and painful struggle with serious clinical depression. My childhood and family life came to an end when I was 16 years old. I came home one evening after being out with friends to find my mother dead on the floor of our living room. From the way she was laying, it appeared she was trying to reach the telephone to call for help. Less than 17 years later, I turned 17 and began to live my dream of working in broadcasting. Since I was more or less on my own, I started the process of trying to move away from the past, to stuff down the traumas large and small and get on with my life. But it wasn't that easy. For many years into adulthood, married with 4 children, I tried to ignore my depression. I self medicated with alcohol, was angry a lot, and because of the anxiety, worried about money, my job, and the future. Finally, after years of trying and failing to get a hold of myself, I threw in the towel and sought help. I took 7 months away from my radio job, got my depression and anxiety under control with medication, changed my outlook about things, and went back to work. The past 20 years since then have been my most creative, satisfying, and financially rewarding. I retired from full time radio in December 2019, but I'm busy with a podcast, voiceover work, and other endeavors. Here's the kicker, guys. I didn't seek help for 2 decades because I didn't want to admit I suffered with mental illness. I self stigmatized. I was petrified of friends or colleagues finding out and believed I could pull up my socks and deal with it alone. My only regret is that I waited as long as I did to get help. John McComb. Guys, I want to say this.
Wow.
In
Thank you for sharing that. That's powerful.
you're experts and clinically trained. I'm not, but I have this experience from my own learning and lived experience. There is a possibility that in our brains we've been taught to think it's not okay to say we're not okay. It could be that that's a thinking trap wired within us, and that in many of the companies and in many of the boards, it really is okay. We just are too ashamed of feeling because of that stigma. When
Right.
John, what happened with John though, but this story, he was on the mic one day and he had a panic attack, and he told me this in private over coffee. He said he ran to the front doors of the studio. And if it wasn't for the second doors being locked, he said he would have ran out and never come back. He said, thank God the second door is locked. And he said, when he sat down with the producer and he told them he was having these episodes, here's what they did. They put their arms around him. They said, John, we're going to give you a year off. We're going to look after you. You go, get well, man. He came back, went back on the radio. He won the Order of Canada Award, or a Courageous Canadian Award, right from our government. And he decided to use his mental health journey to get himself well, and the mic to actually talk about the stigma. And he opened it wide up. He's known all over the world when he speaks on the mic. So that is the example of, is it really not okay? When I say you can't, is a bigger answer. You're right. Tongue in cheek, you can't. But it could be that in many companies, especially with the way the world's changing, with the work you guys do, with the tools, education that's coming along about mental health, that you just need what I call a John McComb or a Tom Dutta. You need a warrior, somebody who's going to crack open that door and get bloody going through that door. But when I first said to my coach, when I became a CEO in a boardroom, when she broke me and I started crying because she became aggressive in a conversation with me, and it appeared that she was my father. I didn't know this till later. I was fearful for my job. I thought she was going to go back to the board who hired her to coach me and say, this guy's a loser. It was the opposite. So we can say we're not okay, but what I'm saying is it has to be the right courage culture, and we have to have the right people And that's evolving. It's evolving. So speak out. And
It is. And I think I want to give guidance there, honestly, for people that are, whether you're in corporate world or whether you're in working for the city or whether you're working in a police station office or wherever you might be, because Tom, yeah, thank you for reading that. That's powerful. And it's funny because as you were reading that, I'm thinking like, dude, God, like through my therapist's eyes, I'm going to tell you, like, Tom, I would venture to say probably 60 to 70% of the people that are in my office are dealing with this stuff for the first time. Like I see that actually happening like often, it's like, and I want that to be extended to the world as much as possible. And so the guidance that I would give, if you're feeling that way out there listening to this, and I've talked about it with the guy that I mentioned, you can do that right now. Yes, Tom, it's evolving. But I think what I want to do is give guidance to choose your friends wisely, right? Like find those people on the board. It might be 1 or 2 people of the 10 that you have on there. The other 8 people are just going to judge you and they're going to crash on you and they're going to be mean. They're going to be whatever, maybe. But there's 2 people on the board, or maybe there's that one person in the office that you can connect with privately at first, like break it open. Like you say, get blood on your hands. You know what? Let the pressure out. I would make it a little bit different metaphor. Like just let the steam out of the pot maybe for a minute and have that conversation. Let that other person know at the bank, Craig. Maybe it's even an underling, someone that you're managing. You can find those people that are trustworthy, that aren't going to judge you, that aren't going to fire you, that aren't going to crush you, that you can just have a genuine moment with. I think that we could do that now. I'm sorry, I'm a little passionate in the moment, but like, dude, like we can do that, right, Craig?
Yeah, I think so. I guess the question I would have for the both of you guys is, and I'll say this, when I was going through my divorce, I did tell my manager, hey, here's what's going on.
Yeah.
Here's what's going on. It's not going to affect my work and I'm good to go. But I was, we were in marriage counseling and I was seeing the counselor privately as well along with that. So I was dealing with the things that were going on in my head already. And I felt like I was responsible to tell him what was going on just so he would know. But he wasn't my counselor is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at what point do you, you're not going to go tell the board, I'm having anxiety, I'm freaking out, because they're not your therapist.
Yeah. I got an answer for you.
Okay. I want to hear it.
Yeah, I got an answer for you because I've thought about this a lot. I've gone through some really stressful things in life as well. And I learned this personally as well as professionally. The answer, I think, to what you're asking is you share with the person on the level that you want that relationship to be, right? So if I've shared with you a lot, Craig, because I value your friendship and I go deep.
Right.
Somebody that I want to just, be connected to me, but I want to be genuine with them. I'm just going to say, hey, you know what? I wrecked my car last week and I'm really stressed out, but when I'm talking to you, whom I value a friendship with, I'm going to go deeper. I'm going to say, holy cow, Craig, like I wrecked my car and I'm stressed out this week and I'm tripping out about driving. It's freaking me out because I see it happen again. I don't know what to do with this. I'm in a panic. Help me and talk to me and cry with me. But that's not going to be the person that I don't want that level to be on.
Yeah, but I guess my, and I know you have those kind of friendships in a work environment, but I'm probably not going to share my deepest, darkest secrets with somebody that I'm working with or for.
No, but you can say, I'm really stressed out this month because I'm really in the separation process.
Well, I'm saying that's what I did.
Yeah, exactly.
I told Dave, hey, here's what's going on, just so you know.
I think you nailed it.
I got it handled.
I think you nailed it.
Yeah, can I jump in on that too?
No. Yeah, sure, man.
Okay. in Canada, no means yes. You know that.
Right.
Hey, Craig, what you said is brilliant. I just want to riff on that. It shouldn't be up to Craig to worry about whether he can share it. As I said, that if we create a culture where Craig knows it's okay to say he's not okay, and that culture takes work. If we create it, he shouldn't have to worry. I worked in Costco for a period of time doing some physical lifting activity to get through my injury. And I was actually at a level where I was sort of a team leader. And when I started saying to my guys on the floor, I said, look, guys, I said, this is really stressful. We have 400 people coming through the door. They call it a door count an hour. This is like pandemic city. And I said, I'm just seeing that sometimes it's going to get crazy and scary. So I just want you guys to know, whenever you want, whenever it gets crazy and scary, just talk about it. Here's the thing. You don't have to, by the way, sharing your story is not crying and throwing up, getting into the gory details. I'm not your counselor. That's for your counselor. So we got to be clear here. But being able to say, you know what, there's 400 people in here. They're all not wearing masks and I'm feeling a little stressed out. And know that my boss gave me permission. If I create a courage culture and I am a manager, this is what I said about creating a company from the top. Teach your managers to tell your employees, you know what, it's okay if you're feeling stressed or if there's something going on. It's okay for you to take a couple minutes and come and talk to me about it. I'm going to give you a safe place for that. It's not your job to solve it. But if you have counseling resources and all these things, some people then can come and say, you know what, I'm feeling a little. Why is it when we have a stomach ache at work, we can come and tell our boss and they go, yeah, take a sick day? What the heck's the difference? I'm
Yeah,
feeling,
man.
I'm feeling anxious because there's 400 people in the door
Right.
count and there's no social distancing and my grandma might get COVID through me. I just want to come and blow off steam. Tom, thanks. First of all, thanks. I hear you. I'm stressed too. Listen, I'm your manager, but I tell you what, I got a couple things you can do. You can take a couple hours off. We have counseling confidential. You
Go
can
to
do
the
it.
Zen room.
Go to the Zen room, man, and do this. Tommy over there might have a bit of pot. He's from Canada. Go smoke a joint. I'm just kidding. All right, you can edit that out.
It's my
My
kind of
po-
board meeting.
I know, right? Hey, listen, I want to jump in and just sort of begin funneling us in on time. The devil of time is approaching us. I know, and it's funny, Mr. Dutta, you have to actually go to work, right? Like you
Yeah, I
got to.
do.
He's got a job, Craig. He's got to get to. He's got to wait tables. That's funny. But so finish up what you were saying there, man.
No, all I'm saying is in Craig's case, Craig's right. But if I have a board of directors and they're my boss, all right. And there's another topic tied to this, which we learn when we become business leaders and managers. It's called building currency. I don't know if you've heard that, maybe not. When you
Yeah.
go into a company, you build currency. So if you're at the bottom, you find people at different levels and you start building rapport and relationships. So for example, if I am the manager of a department, I might over time get to know, meet the CEO and leave a good impression with him. I might have somebody in another department who says, that Tom guy works hard. He's got a good attitude. When you build currency and you have maybe people at different points of an organization, that when somebody says, hey, that Tom guy, I don't know if he's capable. He seems to get anxious a lot. You have people who got your back. You have people who say, no, he's one of the hardest workers. That guy,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with him. The thing is, here's the last thing on it. Let's stop thinking there's something wrong with us if we feel anxious, because anxiety, over 80% of people get anxious. Let's stop saying that we feel depressed, because all of us feel depressed on some days because of things happening in life. Depression is simply depressive thoughts, sadness, negative thoughts. When it turns into an illness, then we need to get help and manage it. But every leader out there, I tell you this, and I'll close on this, every leader in business, or every person in any company you walk into at any point in the day will feel the emotion of anxiety.
Yep.
Will sometimes they'll get a text message from somebody that they're dealing with someone, they'll kind of feel sad. That's just life. So let's talk
Right.
about it. I have a stomach ache. I feel anxious. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And that might have come from their wife, or it might have come from their husband. Who knows? Could be anything. Yeah, okay, Mr. Talkative Tom. I only say that very affectionately because you've told me that in part one, we need to cut you off sometimes. So, Mr. Talkative Tom, I'm going to ask you a question and you cannot answer it. The reason why I'm asking this question of you is to kind of give a little bit of a plug of what I anticipate with our monthly throwdown, we'll call it maybe. I don't know. We got to come up with a cool name, Mr. Dutta. Here's a little bit of what I see happening with our conversations that we're going to have, maybe a YouTube channel or something. This is an example of something that Tom wanted us to come up with a question, and he just kind of riffs on it. I love that. Riffing with Tom. We're going to do something, man. But how can you follow like the leaders of a restaurant, or Costco when you have been literally a CEO of major corporations around the nation, right? How do
Right.
you follow in that situation? I said you can't answer, didn't I? I am so sorry to burn you that way. We got to taxi in, Craig. But that's the kind of thing I think we're going to get into when we're talking. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun, Mr. Dutta. I am so super happy that you're willing to do that with us. I'm very excited about it with it. Craig, I have a way I want to end us, but why don't you summarize? We ran over the audience a little bit, but so what, right? What are you thinking? How can you sum us up? Anything that you have burning to bring out?
I don't think I have any burning things. It's been another great conversation, Tom. Thank you so much for coming. And, I'm visualizing the Tom Dutta, sorry.
I love it.
Chris Kasdick and Craig Graves show. This is awesome. I wish we could do it once a week. This is good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if there was ever a vision in my mind of what would I call my talk, it would be The Way of the Quiet Warrior. Simply that. There's a book I'm listening to now called The Way of the Seal by Mark Devine, and he's talking about his stuff he learned in SEAL land, Navy SEAL land, and applying it to life. So I want to say this one thing and leave you with a gift, guys, because I do have to go wait tables. I wish you were there. I'd pour you a beer. I want to say this, and I will answer that question next time, because I got to tell you, it was a test of humility, courage, and I had to find my faith and get over my ego to do those type of jobs. There is a TED Talk out there. Can't remember what it's called. You can Google it. Maybe I'll send it to you for the show notes. And a leader's number one role is to create other leaders. And when you go into a company as a leader, you have to find your first follower. So I think this video, this TED Talks that you find, is called Dancing Guy on a Hill. And if you've ever seen it, it starts out, it's live. It's filmed live on this hill with a whole bunch of young people partying they're sitting on the ground. It's a sunny day. One guy gets up with no shirt on and starts dancing around and just doing this wild, crazy stuff. And within minutes, hundreds of people are up dancing and around him. But it takes a while. There's a message in that video. And what you do when you're a leader, if I'm going into a company that's toxic and I want to create a courage culture, I'm going to look throughout and find my first follower. And I'm going to start dancing. I'm going to infect them. And then they're going to infect others. So when you go into companies that you can't say you're not okay, you'd start with finding your first follower. And then you chip away through that. And eventually, like that video, when you watch it, the entire culture will change. And culture, by the way, to change it takes 5 to 7 years in some cases. So it's a long journey.
Love it.
I'll leave you with that. Look forward to
Yeah, absolutely love it. All right. Well, I'm going to do our clap here in just a second, like we did last time, because it's courageously sharing. And so I'm going to count us down in a minute. But Tom, before we do that, I really want you to understand, the influence that you have with your story. I think you do. I'm not presumptuous to think that you don't, but I share my story, Craig, not my story. I share Tom's story in my office multiple times. Like I have pulled up the TEDx talk and for people that really I feel can benefit from it. And so, Tom, I just want to honor you with the acknowledgement of what I think you probably already know, that you're really changing lives, and it's awesome to see. It's awesome to be in a small way a part of that, even with this show. For example, I just had on Friday, February the 12th, 2021, a woman that fell in a tub just like you, Tom. And she knows that just like you, who is in the corporate world successful, just trying to manage her mental health. And it was a palpable, powerful moment, when I was talking about that with you, that she kind of brought back. And I just really appreciate you making your story, which is dynamic, public, for the benefit of the world. So go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm humbled, and I'll pray for that lady. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was an amazing moment. So I'm going to count us down, and then we're going to get out of here. And I'll tell you what we're doing next week. So we're going to go 3, 2, 1. Awesome, man. Very, very appreciative of you, sir.
Hey, thanks, guys. Look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, Tom. See you soon, man.
So we're going to do a pretty big transition for the show next week, Craig. Neil had pointed out we hadn't done a lot of things on parenting, and we're going to talk about parenting in this world that we have, helplessness and hopelessness in parenting. And I'm going to talk about really broadly, but I'm going to talk about my own stress in that. Mr. Dutta would be pretty proud of me. I'm going to be kind of, take the Quiet Warrior show and put it on through a therapist's eyes a little bit and admit that I am stressed, man, in parenting. How about that?
I think we all can admit that.
Yeah, maybe that's not too.
We all should admit it.
Right. So thank you for being with us, guys. We love doing the show. We ask you to go to throughatherapist's.com, check out the stuff that we've got there. Check us out on Spotify. Hit the like button. That really helps us, and it really helps us a lot to hit the share button. Let's get this thing growed here in 2021. So we will see you all next week. You willing to come back and figure this thing out together, Craig?
I am. I'll be here.
Let's do it.